Evander Holyfield was boxing's ultimate warrior, raw determination, unforgettable heart, and a presence that defined an era. He's taking those shots, still coming forward the eater. Oh my God. Despite becoming the only four-time heavyweight champion in history, Holyfield's story is one of painful contradictions. Olympic glory and championship reigns, but ended in bankruptcy and foreclosure. One of the richest fighters ever, yet lost a $250 million fortune. From respected legend to cautionary tale, how did the boxer with the biggest part in the ring lose everything outside of it? Let's break it all down. Evander the real deal Holyfield wasn't just a great fighter, he was boxing's ultimate gladiator. The only boxer to become heavyweight champion, 4 separate times, an Olympic medalist, the man who conquered both cruiserweight and heavyweight divisions, and half of some of the most dramatic battles the sport has ever witnessed. He was also part of boxing's last golden era. Tyson, Lewis, Bo, Holyfield, giants who actually fought each other to determine who was truly the best. And while Holyfield carved out his legendary status through sheer will and determination, his journey was anything but easy. Because let's not forget, he wasn't some naturally gifted heavyweight knockout artist. He was an undersized fighter who had to claw and battle for every victory against men who outweighed him by 30, 40, sometimes 50 pounds. So how did this supposedly too small cruiserweight transform into one of the most resilient champions boxing has ever seen? To answer that, we need to go all the way back to where the Evander Holyfield story really began. Born in the deep poverty of Atmore, Alabama in 1962, Evander was the youngest of 9 children in a household where survival was the daily goal. His mother Annie had moved the family to Atlanta when he was just a child, searching for better opportunities and an escape from crushing rural poverty. Home was the Bowen Homes housing projects, a place where violence was common and dreams went to die. Life was far from easy for young Evander, sharing beds, wearing hand-me-downs, and often going hungry. That alone would have been enough struggle for most people, but fate had other plans for Holyfield. At just 8 years old, he discovered the local boys' club, a decision that would change his life forever. Because that's where a trainer named Carter Morgan first put boxing gloves on his hands and where Holyfield discovered something that would define his entire career. Morgan saw something special in the skinny kid from the projects. "This one's different," he told others at the gym. "This one doesn't know how to quit." And he was right. By age 12, Evander was already gaining a reputation around Atlanta. At 13, he qualified for his first Junior Olympics. And by 15, he had become the Southeastern Regional Champion, dominating kids who had been boxing years longer. The signs were there. This kid was special, not because he was the strongest or the most naturally gifted, but because he simply refused to lose. His mother Annie instilled in him a philosophy that would carry him through his entire career. You don't have to be the biggest or the strongest, but you can be the one who never stops trying. Watching young Evander train, few could have predicted just how far that mindset would take him. By the time he reached his teens, Holyfield had already compiled an impressive amateur record. At just 21, he represented the United States at the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. The entire nation watched as he dominated his competition, advancing all the way to the semifinals. What happened next would give the world its first glimpse of the controversy that would follow Holyfield throughout his career. In his semifinal bout against New Zealand's Kevin Barry, Holyfield was disqualified for hitting after the referee called break, despite the fact that the referee's command came mid-combination. The decision was widely criticized, and even the referee later admitted he made a mistake. But instead of raging against the injustice, Holyfield showed remarkable poise, accepting the bronze medal with dignity. "I know what happened. God knows what happened. I can live with that," he told reporters. What most people missed amid the controversy was how dominant Holyfield had been in that fight and throughout the tournament. He wasn't just winning, he was destroying opponents. After turning professional in November 1984, Holyfield didn't just win. He steamrolled through the cruiserweight division, racking up 11 straight victories before getting his first title shot. On July 12, 1986, he met Dwight Muhammad Coley for the WBA Cruiserweight Championship. What was supposed to be a tough but manageable test turned into a 15-round war that many consider the greatest cruiserweight fight in history. For nearly an hour, the two men traded punishment at a pace that seemed impossible to maintain. When the final bell rang, Holyfield had claimed his first world title by split decision. The victory was impressive, But what stunned boxing experts was that Holyfield had thrown over 1,200 punches, a superhuman output that hinted at his extraordinary conditioning. After unifying all the cruiserweight titles by defeating Carlos de Leon in 1988, Holyfield made the decision that would define his career. He was moving up to heavyweight. Boxing experts were skeptical at best. At just 208 pounds, Holyfield seemed far too small to compete with the monsters who ruled heavyweight boxing. When he announced his intention to eventually fight Mike Tyson, who was then cutting a path of destruction through the division, many thought he was suicidal. But Holyfield had other ideas. After 3 impressive wins as a heavyweight, including a devastating knockout of former champion Pinklon Thomas, he earned a shot at undisputed heavyweight champion James "Buster" Douglas, who had shocked the world by knocking out the seemingly invincible Tyson. On October 25, 1990, in one of his most clinical performances, Holyfield knocked out Douglas in the 3rd round to become undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The cruiserweight, who was too small, had climbed to the top of boxing's most prestigious mountain. But Holyfield's greatest challenges and most defining moments were still ahead. After successful defenses against former champions George Foreman and Larry Holmes, the fight everyone wanted finally seemed within reach: Mike Tyson. But just as negotiations were being finalized, Tyson was convicted of rape and sentenced to prison. Instead, Holyfield faced another giant, 6'5", Riddick Bowe. Their first fight in November 1992 produced one of boxing's greatest wars. Despite being dropped in the 11th round, Holyfield refused to quit, rising to his feet and firing back with everything he had. Though he lost his titles by unanimous decision, the heart he showed in defeat only enhanced his legend. 1 year later, they met again in a rematch now famous for the Fan Man incident, when a paraglider crashed into the ring during the 7th round. When the fight resumed, Holyfield reclaimed his heavyweight crown by majority decision, showing tactical adjustments that proved he was more than just heart and determination. He was a thinking fighter who could adapt. Their saga wouldn't end there. The rubber match came in November 1995, and it delivered perhaps the most brutal chapter of their trilogy. After a thunderous battle that saw Holyfield score an early knockdown, Bowe gradually wore down the smaller champion. In the 8th round, the unthinkable happened. For the first time in his career, Holyfield was stopped. As he crumpled under Bowe's relentless assault, the boxing world collectively gasped. The man who had never been knocked out, whose heart had seemed unbreakable, had finally been broken. It was a sobering reminder that even the greatest warriors have limits. Then came the rivalry that would define his career: Mike Tyson. After losing his title to Michael Moore and briefly retiring due to a heart condition, later diagnosed as incorrect, Holyfield returned to face the feared Tyson on November 9, 1996. Entering as a 25-1 underdog, Holyfield shocked the world by not just beating Tyson, but dominating him, stopping the feared puncher in the 11th round. Their rematch 7 months later produced the most infamous moment in modern boxing history: the bite. When Tyson, frustrated by Holyfield's dominance, bit off a piece of Evander's ear and was disqualified, it created an image that transcended sports. Lost in the controversy was the fact that Holyfield was once again demonstrating his mastery over the fighter once considered invincible. The Tyson victory cemented Holyfield as a legend, but his warrior spirit wouldn't let him stop there. The latter part of Holyfield's career showed both his greatness and his fatal flaw: he simply didn't know when to quit. His trilogy with John Ruiz, becoming heavyweight champion for the 4th time by defeating Ruiz in their 2nd fight, was admirable but showed his declining skills. The battering he took against Lennox Lewis in their 2 fights raised concerns about his long-term health. Yet he fought on, continuing to take fights well into his 40s, long after his prime had passed. By the time he finally retired in 2011 at age 48, after a win over Brian Nielsen, Holyfield had engaged in 57 professional fights, many of them brutal wars that took their toll on his body, and as we'd later learn, his finances. But even as his skills declined in the ring, the true devastation was happening outside it. Despite earning over $250 million during his career, Holyfield's financial empire was collapsing around him. In 2008, the unthinkable happened. His 109-room mansion in Atlanta, valued at $10 million, went into foreclosure. The 54,000-square-foot home with 17 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, and an Olympic-sized pool gone. His assets were being seized, his bank accounts emptied. How could a man who had earned $250 million find himself broke? The answer was a perfect storm of bad decisions. Lavish spending was just the beginning. Child support for 11 children from multiple relationships drained millions from his accounts. Failed business ventures, including a record label and a barbecue sauce line, hemorrhaged cash. And then there were the hangers-on, an entourage that at one point numbered over 20 people, all on his payroll. I wasn't ready for the business side, Holyfield would later admit. In the ring, I knew what to do. Outside it, I was lost. The man who had once commanded $20 million paydays was reduced to selling his memorabilia to survive. Olympic bronze medal, sold. Championship belts, sold. The gloves from the Tyson fight, sold. Even his 1984 Olympic row went to the highest bidder. By 2012, he was completely broke, a cautionary tale of how quickly fortune can disappear without financial literacy. And sadly, the downward spiral didn't stop there. It wasn't just bad financial decisions that raised eyebrows. Holyfield's personal life became increasingly chaotic. He cycled through multiple marriages, fathered children with several different women, and found himself entangled in bitter child support battles that played out publicly. There were allegations of domestic violence. Then came the PED scandal. In 2007, Holyfield's name surfaced in an investigation of an Alabama pharmacy that was allegedly distributing steroids. Records showed a patient named Evander Fields receiving packages of PEDs with Holyfield's address and matching his birth date. Though he denied the allegations, the cloud of suspicion permanently attached itself to his remarkable physique and late career longevity. His reputation took another hit when he appeared on the UK's Celebrity Big Brother in 2014 and made homophobic comments, comparing homosexuality to a handicap that could be fixed. The man, once universally respected for his dignity and class, was now making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Perhaps most concerning were the signs of potential brain damage. In televised interviews, Holyfield sometimes slurred his words or seemed confused, troubling signs for a man who had absorbed punishment in epic battles throughout his career. The warrior who had never backed down in the ring was now fighting battles he couldn't win, and the results were painful to watch. Let's put all the personal stuff aside and focus on what really matters: legacy. Because when it comes to boxing history, Holyfield's place is secure. An International Boxing Hall of Famer, the only 4-time heavyweight champion in history, a champion in 2 weight classes, and a man who gave us some of the most unforgettable fights of the modern era. His trilogy with Riddick Bowe stands as perhaps the greatest heavyweight rivalry of the 1990s. His victory over Mike Tyson remains one of boxing's most stunning upsets. And his heart, that incredible, seemingly unbreakable heart, set a standard for courage that few fighters have ever matched. Even in defeat, Holyfield demonstrated a champion's dignity, rarely making excuses or diminishing his opponent's victories. His fighting style was unique, technically sound yet willing to wage war when necessary. At his best, he combined precise counterpunching with relentless pressure, all built on a foundation of conditioning that allowed him to outwork bigger men. He wasn't the biggest puncher, the fastest boxer, or the most skilled technician, but he blended all those elements with an indomitable will that made him greater than the sum of his parts. He wasn't perfect inside or outside the ring, but if we're handing out respect, Evander, the real deal Holyfield, deserves his share and then some. But what about you? Was Holyfield your favorite heavyweight of the 90s era, or did you ride with Tyson, Lewis, or Bowe? And what do you think of his life after boxing? Losing $250 million after earning it the hardest way possible. Taking punches from the baddest men on the planet. That's tough to witness. We're sure you've got plenty to say, so drop your comments below. And if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe because we got plenty more boxing stories coming your way. See you in the next one.